How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Liberty Hour here, streaming through Spreaker Studio, the 16 Jackson AJ1 Twitter account, and the A2 Jack YouTube channel. I'm back here with my guest, Miles, and we were just talking about who we believe has the best chances in the Democratic primary in 2020, who we'd like to see win, all that kind of stuff. And, I was like thinking, okay, there's got to be some polls that are done maybe already. I was thinking maybe not, maybe it's a little too early. There are polls that are being done. And oh my God, Biden, who isn't even announced in the race, has 29.4%. He has 29.4%, but he hasn't even announced that he's getting in yet. I don't. What? Like, how? How does he have 29.4%? Something that's really annoying on here, though, is I do not see Gabbard's name. If you go to Real Clear Politics and you search up 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, Tulsi Gabbard's name does not even appear on this. That is an absolute disgrace. Emerson, CNN, which we know CNN's trash, Morning Consult, Monmouth, which is actually a conservative one, and Harvard Harris, none of them even have Tulsi's name on there. That is a joke. That is a lie. I'm sorry. There is no way. Gillibrand has 0.4%. There is no way that Tulsi Gabbard's name has less than 0.4% out of everybody on here. That is something that's being hidden by these polling places for sure. But anyways, I'm gonna try to get out of that. Biden has 29.4%. If Biden enters the race, Miles, how much of a chance do you think that he has to become the nominee? And do you think he could pose a threat against Trump?
Joe Biden, if he enters the race, is the nominee, 100%. I saw something today that I don't know if he was thinking about it or someone suggested that he ran with Stacey Abrams or whatever that chick's name is. I think it's Abrams or whatever. But I definitely think the whole left is romanticized with Joe Biden, everything to do with him. I don't know how much of a sound presidential candidate he'd make, but I do think he could have a pretty good chance of taking on Trump, actually. It just depends on who he would take as his VP. I don't even know that it would matter. I think the left will vote for Joe Biden regardless. I think they're too in love with him unless he were to seriously mess up.
Yeah, and so you got Joe Biden at 29.4% on the Real Clear Politics average, and then you got Sanders at 23.4%. I knew Kamala Harris would be the one. She's at 10.4. Beto O'Rourke at 8. Warren at 6.6, and Booker at 4.0. I'm even going to the Iowa Democratic caucus ones, and I still don't see any mention of Gabbard's name on here. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. She entered the race 2 months ago, and it's not even listed. I'm sorry. I'm just shocked about that. I'm going to be in shock about that for a few minutes. I'm going to try to get back to the show. That's amazing to me how they're going to try to put a person who is posing themselves the most anti-establishment person below. But why should I be surprised? It's what they do all along. Welcome to politics in America, where it's absolute trash. Going to an issue outside of the 2020 election. I just because I wanted to talk about it with you, because I know that this is a controversial issue with libertarians. Everyone, well, not really with everyone alike, but with libertarians, I think it's actually quite a controversial issue, and that's the issue of price gouging. And so there's different definitions or ways you could take it. I'll explain 2 of them, and I'll get your thoughts on just it in general here in a second. So one of the situations could be viewed as entertainment. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm getting tickets to the U.S. Open. I already got tickets to the U.S. Open, and most hotels within a 30-mile radius of Monterey are like $500 to $1,000 a night, because they know that people are going to have, want to stay overnight. They're coming from all around the country, all around the world, wanting to go to the historic Pebble Beach because it's a once-in-a-decade thing, and they'll pay whatever the heck money they have to stay somewhere overnight. Well, Airbnb, and this is why I think these companies are so great, because they actually provide you other opportunities outside of these main hotels, is people, obviously on Airbnb, most people will know what that is, but if you don't, is where people can basically put up their house, either their entire house or a private room to rent it out to basically a potential person to stay there. And I managed to get a place for $110, and it just sniped it, and it's great. But obviously, when you charge somebody $500 to $1,000 a night to stay, when it's normally say $250, $300, that's, doubling, tripling the price. That's price gouging. It's pricing other people who would be there out of the market, essentially. Um, and it's the same thing with sporting events. And this, I'll ask you this question here in a sec after I get your thoughts on price gouging. But basically with sporting events, because of the amount of contracts there are today, with how much people are paid, and then you go to the other aspect side of things, and that comes to like natural disasters, for example, and that's like, for example, like the hurricanes that happen out east. If people need water, they charge much more for water, and that's a little bit more understandable, at least in my opinion, because people, if everybody's going to buy that water, there's not going to be any more water. So you need to price it to where some people can buy it, but not everybody can, because people are going to you're going to get screwed one way or another, essentially.
Yeah.
But I want to just get your thought in general on price gouging, situation by situation, like what your thoughts are on it in general.
I mean, the way I kind of look at it is just supply and demand. If you got the demand, I mean, you can kind of set your price for the supply. I mean, it does suck if you don't got the money for it, or, I mean, even if you do got the money for it, it's kind of stupid if something's going to be doubled or tripled in price. But at the same time, if like if you're a hotel owner or hotel manager, whatever it is, and you're going to have an influx of people where you're going to sell out the entire hotel, you might as well max out your profits before you max out the entire hotel capacity wise. On the issue of like water during natural disasters or food or whatever, I mean, shortages happen no matter what it is, no matter what product, commodity, anything. If you have a short supply of it, it's going to be expensive. Why do you think diamonds are so expensive? Why do you think gold's so expensive? Anything that there's scarcity of is going to create very high prices. So I wouldn't say against price gouging. Do I agree with it? Not all the time, but I don't really have too big of an issue with it.
And another thing too that me and another person at work were talking about earlier on this issue is, you don't want to blame victims in tragedies or natural disasters and stuff like that. But in cases of hurricanes in those areas of the country where it's definitely a common thing that you see at least happen, once every other year, there's a fair amount of warning, and obviously not everybody can get out of those towns because they don't, some people are in poor neighborhoods and they can't afford transportation and stuff like that. But I feel like, and I hate to say this, but I feel like people are given enough time to where if they wanted to get out, they could. And that's another thing too, is you do have to put some blame on these people that don't get out of those situations, because they're putting themselves in a terrible situation they're putting themselves under their own risk, essentially. And so that's another thing as well, is it takes a amount of personal responsibility, which I preach on this show a lot, of understanding the risks and consequences if you don't get out of a certain situation. I don't want to lose my house, but at the same time, I don't want to lose my life and everybody else. So I should probably leave, even though it's going to obviously hurt no matter what. It's a tough situation because obviously living on the West Coast, that's not something we face. But that's at least my thought on it. I don't know what you have to think about that.
I totally just lost what I was going to say. Can you repeat like just a little bit of what you were just saying?
Yeah, so I was just saying, like, I don't want to blame victims, but at the same time, they do have plenty of time to get out of certain situations. And even though we don't live on the West Coast, this is, the way I would look at it anyway. So go ahead. I think you remember now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if you live in those parts of the country, like if you live in Kansas, you're not going to buy a house without a basement, right?
Right.
I mean, there's fucking tornadoes everywhere. When tornado season happens, hurricane season happens or whatever, and you're stuck at home and don't want to leave and don't have enough supplies, I can't really feel bad for you when you're going to the store and complaining about paying $200 for a case of water. Maybe you should have stocked up before hurricane season hit. Maybe prepare a little bit more. I mean, I don't know. It kind of sounds fucked up, but at the same time, you can't get mad at something being super high priced when you didn't prepare in the first place.
Right, yeah, and that's what it comes down to, because, I mean, it's a matter of understanding, because, your house is going under and you're going under, but at the same time, fuck, that business can go under. They still have to
Exactly.
operate, and
Exactly.
if that business goes under and it's a private business, then that person's livelihood goes under. So I mean, it's a dog eat dog world we live in, and it's a matter of just understanding the circumstances and what happens in these situations by researching what's happened in the past and understanding what you need to do. And I think that the good thing is there is an increased amount of notice, I think, for people nowadays in these natural disasters. Unfortunately, like we saw last year with what happened in Hawaii, sometimes there's too much, or sometimes there's accidental notice of it, and that can lead to some crazy crap too. And I feel bad for what happened last year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up because I won't talk about it right now. But back to somewhat of what I was saying about this whole price gouging thing in terms of the entertainment side of things. I mentioned the fact that players are getting huge contracts nowadays. And speaking of the huge contracts, Mike Trout, who's been playing for the Angels his entire career, just finalized a record re-sign of 12 years, $430 million contract, which is insane. I heard Stephen A. earlier this week on First Take saying, he could even be a billion-dollar player. My thing is, obviously teams make a good amount of money when it comes to, ticket sales, concessions, and all this, all that kind of stuff. But, I put this poll out on Twitter, and I actually got a pretty fair response by a lot of people on this, and I'll admit, I think it depends on sport, but what are your thoughts on players that are getting these massive, hundreds of $1 million contracts, like $300-400 million contracts? Do you think that, for example, you're a Red Sox fan. Mookie Betts is going to become, he's going to be a free agent this next year. He's probably going to want a lot of money. What do you think? Where do we draw the line on how much athletes make in today's world?
That's the thing. I don't know that we put a limit on it, but at the same, I don't have an issue with these guys getting paid all this money. I just think it's going to be increasingly hard to try and lock down big time players and actually have a team that can win shit other than just having one player that's really good. Because I think this whole precedent that's being set with $400 million contracts and shit, like Mookie will get a 400 million. I don't think he'll get four, but mid to high threes. I mean, who's next? I mean, you could name anybody that's kind of big and going off right now is going to get some sort of deal over $200 million for 6, 7, 8+ years.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just think, I don't know how the GMs and shit are going to start running this, because you can't give $400 million contracts to 5 players on your team, to 3 players on your team. And to have a good baseball team or whatever team, you can't pay one guy, 2 guys all the fucking money.
Well, and that's the thing, and you bring up a point, it's not just the Major League Baseball where this is happening. Obviously in the NBA, players don't sign with, the team as long because it's obviously much more, this is debatable, but I think some people would view it as much more of grueling than baseball because of how, how much they're on
way
the
more
field.
physically demanding.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously, with football and stuff as well. But, this is a thing as well. In basketball and in the NFL, you don't see these players sign for as long. And I want to get your thought of, what are your thoughts on, these 8, 9, 10, 12-year contracts in general? Are you a fan of them? Why do you think that it is that teams do these contracts without knowing, what this player may be 5 years' time? Just what is your thought on that in general?
I'm not a huge fan of huge contracts because I have yet to see one really, really pay off. I mean, we saw Stanton break the record for 12 years in Miami, and he was out there in how many years?
And ironically, with the Angels, you've got the Pujols thing too.
Yeah, exactly. You got Pujols and Trout in the Angels. I mean, they signed Trout for 12 years. I don't think that's going to really help them at all. I mean, I think they're going to be the same team this year and next year that they were the years before. They might make playoffs, they might not. But anyways, back to the contracts. I don't think there's value in any contracts longer than 5 years, to be real, because I don't see how these guys can project where Mike Trout's going to be 12 years from now. I don't see the value in paying him that much money the entire time until he gets there. But that being said, Trout's a freak. But I would speak more on like Machado or any of these other guys that just got these pretty big contracts. I don't think anything over 5 years is really a great deal for the organization, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not being paid to make those decisions.
Yeah, and I will get into my thoughts of why I believe that it is that teams do this and what I think is a better way for them to go about managing it when we get back from break. This is the Liberty Hour here, and we will be right back. Thank you for tuning in.